lot of consulting work with nonprofits, doing all kinds of projects, strategic planning being one of them. I have done and do a lot of strategic planning consulting. So I have a lot of experience in terms of different organizations and what the priorities are. Next slide, Hugh. Thank you. So for those of you who have been to any workshops from the Chester County Community Foundation, I'm sure this slide is very familiar. So we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about it, but basically it's important to know that strategic planning is one of the 7 basic responsibilities of a nonprofit board. The first one certainly being legal and ethical integrity, meaning that you're complying with any kind of legal regulations, that you're doing things in a professional, ethical manner. Ethics play a large part in nonprofit work because we so depend on contributions and funding from outside sources. And some of the work that we do is also extremely essential and important to the community. And so maintaining an ethical stance and making sure that you're operating in an ethical way and also recognizing best practices for nonprofits is extremely important. Certainly the second goal, the second responsibility is building a competent board, which involves simply making sure that you have a large enough board to be able to provide the adequate oversight, and that your board is diverse enough to really represent your community and represent a variety of professional skills. And the third step here, which is highlighted, talks about 3 basic elements in strategic planning. The first being determining the mission, vision, and purpose. And that's a major responsibility of a nonprofit board. And it's actually step 1 pretty much in doing strategic planning. It's extremely important that everyone in the organization understand what the organization's mission is, and that you check in with the mission. You look at it every couple of years and make sure, square 1, are we following this? And square 2, does this mission still reflect what we need to be doing? Or have significant changes occurred in the community? And maybe we need to adjust what our mission is. It might have worked 20 years ago when we got our 501c3, but now it doesn't quite reflect what we're doing and we need to adapt it. So revisiting that mission, vision, and purpose is an extremely important part of being on a nonprofit board. And it's one of the good things that strategic planning sort of makes sure you have to do that step 1 in order to really build a plan. Another one, of course, is ensuring effective planning, which is what building a strategic plan is. And then monitoring program and service quality, because as part of the strategic plan, that's a natural part of it, because you look at what are our programs, what do we want to keep, what do we want to change, what needs to be strengthened. That's part of strategic planning discussions. And you may also put in your strategic plan, for example, some goals around, we need to evaluate this program. We need to launch a better evaluation tool. We need to relook at these things. So evaluation can play a major role in the goals and objectives that you choose to put in your plan. Certainly number 4 is around fiscal oversight, extremely important. Number 5 is the dreaded fundraising. There it is, ensuring adequate resources. And having a strategic plan that's up to date and current is a very, very helpful fundraising tool. It's not only a fabulous planning tool, but it can really help you with your fundraising. Number 6, enhancing the nonprofit standing. That really relates as board members to being an ambassador and to talking about your organization in very positive ways, raising it up, helping community members to understand what you do. And number 7, of course, is the role of the board, which is to hire, support, monitor, and evaluate the CEO. So that's one very important role of a nonprofit board. So we're going to focus on number 3. So Hugh, would you like to switch the slide? So basically, what is a strategic plan? It's basically a multi-year plan that serves as a roadmap for every aspect of your organization, from program delivery to finance, to fundraising, to how the board functions, human resource issues. Every aspect of your organization will have something included in a strategic plan. And one of the most important things in strategic plans is that they also contain outcomes and metrics so that you can measure your progress. So it's not as you construct your goals and objectives, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, you want to be sure that they are measurable goals and objectives. It's not just increase our community standing. It would be something like increase our community standing in 3 key outlets as evidenced by whatever it might be: increased social media traffic, increased contributions, increased volunteers, whatever that might be. A strategic plan also includes very specific action steps, which include due dates, start dates, and due dates, and it includes budgets. So it's a very comprehensive plan that says these are the things we're going to do. These are the people who are going to be responsible for doing them. This is when it's going to happen, and this is how much it might cost with cost estimates. And a successful strategic plan process ideally will include looking at the external situation. That was the environmental scan. That external situation in terms of your community. How do your stakeholders feel about your organization? How do your client, excuse me, that's my phone. Sorry about that. Very bad. There we go. Sorry. It looks at external feedback, and it also looks at internal. How do your staff feel? What does the board sense? What's going on? What's good? What's not so good? What could be made better? So it involves that kind of due diligence of looking at everything that you're doing before you begin planning. It helps to focus priorities because when you establish your start date and due dates, you will look at what are the things that we really need to do this year, what things could wait till next year. Usually a strategic plan is multiple years, but we're going to talk about that in a minute in terms of how to figure that out. And it's fairly general, although some of the action steps can become very specific. Next slide, Hugh. So what are some of the reasons that we do this in the first place? First of all, it's a plan. It gives you a roadmap. Any successful business needs a roadmap. This is what we need to be doing. I mean, I have a to-do list right here beside me all the time. It's a roadmap. And so it's really important, especially when you have a nonprofit organization that has staff members and board members and committee members and volunteers. It's really important that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing at any given time and why. It's also a fabulous recruitment tool for recruiting new members to your board of directors, new committee members, and staff, because you can show them the strategic plan and say, here's our plan. These are the initiatives we're going to be working on in the next 3 years or the next 2 years or whatever time it is. Are these things you want to work on? So say someone's considering joining the board and their strength is finance, they can read those finance goals and go, oh yeah, these look really great. I've got experience in this area and that area. I'd be happy to help you with that. So it's a very good recruitment tool so that people know what they're stepping into if they join your organization. Donors, savvy donors and institutional funders, such as foundations, corporations, and organizational giving programs, love strategic plans. And in fact, many of them require that you have one in order to be considered for funding. The reason for that is that it shows that you have a plan. You've thought things out. You're not just reacting to things by impulse and saying, oh, this is a good thing to do, let's do that. That there's due diligence and deliberation about how you use your organization's resources. And also, if you're asking a foundation and any donor for a contribution to a project that might already be in the plan, that shows them that the whole concept has been really thought out by a diversity of people so that it's folded into the overall operation of the organization, which is a confidence builder for a funder. So funders love seeing strategic plans. It also can be helpful, especially if you're a new organization, to use a strategic plan as a way to help you decide, should we undertake this new initiative that's appeared? Here's a new opportunity. Somebody came to us and said, oh, couldn't you run this program for me? And you may be going, should I not, should we or not? If you look in the strategic plan and ask yourself, is this concept or this program in general included in the plan? Is it going to support the development of the plan? And if it doesn't, then that might make you step back and think even a little harder before taking on a new initiative. So there's many reasons why we do strategic plans, and you may very well have others as well as you get into doing it. Next slide. So basically, there's 7 major steps in doing strategic planning. And the first one is getting ready. You want to first off think about strategically, what would you like to gain? What would your organization like to gain from the strategic planning process? Because there's many other benefits that you can achieve during strategic planning in addition to having a great plan. For example, if you include staff and board and committee members together in developing the plan, which is the way I recommend you do it, it can build a stronger team where the staff and the board respect and understand and know each other. I once did a strategic planning for Alex's lemonade stand a million years ago. It was their very first one. And their board comprised of these very heavy-hitting corporate leaders and executives. And the staff were all very young. Most of them were under 30. And the board thought the staff were, kids who didn't know what they were doing. And the staff were in awe of the board and were like, oh my goodness, this is terrifying. But we brought everyone together in meetings talking about the organization, and they got to work with each other in little subcommittees. And the staff very quickly realized that these scary board members were simply caring board members who cared about childhood cancer and were good guys. And the board very quickly realized that staff really did know what they were doing and they weren't just kids. And so it helped to create very strong, effective working relationships. And so if you have that situation in your organization, you might think about this could be a very creative way to try to build some of that trust and comradeship. You can also use strategic planning to build relationships in the community, especially through the phase of gathering community feedback, because you can reach out, this works especially well, I think, if you have an independent consultant working with you. You can reach out and interview people who maybe you think might have issues with you or might be dissatisfied with the work or might have concerns. And if you send someone out to talk to that person who's totally impartial and unbiased, just doing the job of interviewing, that can help to mend that relationship, because people do love being asked for advice and they love having an opportunity to openly and honestly talk about anything that might be disturbing them. So it can help to mend relationships, and it can also cultivate new relationships. You might use the strategic planning as an opportunity to interview some donors who you know have the capacity to give more than they are, or donors who have lapsed. Maybe they gave to you generously a couple of years ago, but they haven't given to you in the last couple of years. And you can use that as an opportunity to reach out and say, hey, well, what do you think about our organization? Is there a reason you've stopped giving? What could we do to engage you a little more? It's a nice opportunity to do that. And lastly, I think one of the major benefits that doing strategic planning provides is that it gives you opportunities to sit back and reflect as a group. We get so busy throughout the day. The staff's busy with their lives and their jobs. The board members and committee members are busy with their lives and their volunteer work that they're doing for your organization. And it takes, it's often we forget that it's important to sit back and reflect on what have we been doing in the past, what's working, what isn't, where are we today, and where do we want to go? And strategic planning sort of institutionalizes that, because that's basically what you do in strategic planning. So it makes space for that, because it often needs to be deliberately scheduled and made space for. So that's another huge benefit of strategic planning. The second thing you want to do is you want to, in terms of getting ready, is you need to build a strong, diverse team to work on the plan. And as I've said earlier, the more diverse you can make this group in terms of staff, board, volunteers, committee members, maybe even donors or key people who are also supporting your work, the richer and better and more inclusive your strategic plan will be. So you want to assemble a group that includes the people who are going to be responsible for doing the work so that they have buy-in in the finished plan. In organizations with really small staff or that are very small organization, you might want to include everyone. In a larger organization, you might include management staff and certainly the executive director. And it's really important that the staff, the executive director and key leadership staff at the least, are included from the beginning because they're the people who are doing the work and you really need their input and their expertise as you build the plan. And if your organization relies heavily on volunteers, or you may have key volunteers who are involved, you want to include them as well because their input is essential. They're donating their time to you. So their perspectives can be very, very helpful. And a third element of getting ready is to consider if you need to hire a consultant to help you build the plan. I think one of the major roles that I provide when I'm working with nonprofits and strategic planning is I keep it moving because the executive director and the staff are already doing full-time work. And this can be something that I can contribute and that I can keep the process moving and provide some guidance and structure. And if you do decide to use a consultant, be sure to choose someone who has done work for organizations that are similar in size and scope to yours. Someone on your board who's a hospital CEO really doesn't have the concept of what a strategic plan for, say, a $500,000 nonprofit is. So it's really important that you get someone who's familiar with the kinds of issues that, if you are a smaller that are similar in size to yours, it's really important that you get that as a good fit. Another part of getting ready is to decide whether you want to do an environmental scan or obtain some community feedback. And this can be really helpful to do if your organization hasn't done anything like this in recent years. Often people do such a thing before they do a capital campaign. It's like part of a feasibility study. If you've done one of those in recent years, then maybe you don't need to do it. But if you haven't done it in a while, I think it can be a very helpful process to go through prior to starting strategic planning. And usually this process will involve several different modes, if you will. It'll involve a certain number of individual interviews where someone will go out and talk one-on-one with key people. This could be elected officials, it could be donors, it could be key community leaders whose input and value you really value. It may include focus groups, which are great for other members of your constituency who maybe don't need a one-on-one interview, but you'd really like their input in a small group. And it can include surveys, whether paper or online surveys, for people who are a little further away from your organization. It can also be a useful tool if you have a large staff to include them in either a focus group, several focus groups, or in a survey. And what you want to think about first as you ponder this is, what do we want to learn? So ask yourself, what would be the questions that we want to ask? Maybe you're considering launching a new program in a couple of years and you'd like people's feedback about the program. You might be anticipating a capital campaign in a few years. And so you want to get them ready. This is a great pre-capital campaign opportunity to say, hey, we're thinking about building this new building and expanding our programs. What would you think about that? So you want to think about all kinds of things that you would like to learn. So think about that first. And then think about, who do we know who out there would have really thoughtful, good answers, be able to give us some good answers. So you don't want to go to someone who barely knows your organization and ask them in-depth questions about things because they don't really know what you're doing. So you think about what you need to learn first and then figure out where you can go to learn it. And the culmination of this environmental scan is when I'm working on it, it's a written report that then the full group, when we get together to start strategic planning, can review and read over the input and the data from all of the responses and get a sense of what do people think and what are people's suggestions. The next step in getting in, after you've done all that preliminary get ready work, is phase 2, is to get everyone together and to work on looking at the mission, the vision, and the values, as I explained before. And this would be the group that you've decided is going to be your strategic planning group. Phase 3 is looking at your internal situation, and the acronyms for that are SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, and SOAR, and I can never remember what SOAR stands for, but they're basically the same thing. You want to use some kind of a tool to help you see, to help you look at the organization yourself. So with SWOT, it's looking at the strengths. What's really strong today? What do we do well? What's a weakness? What isn't so good? What should be made a little better? And I always say in strategic planning, coming up with things for the weakness column, it's not complaining. You're proactively identifying things that if they were made a little better or a lot better, would help you do your work that much more. So it's a very productive, useful thing to come up to identify things that, hey, we should be doing this better, or we don't do this at all and we should be. Opportunities are things out in the community that are going to make, just because they exist, may make doing your strategic plan and your work a little easier. So, for example, it could be a new corporation opening up, and you're thinking, oh, this could be a new opportunity for some corporate funding. Or opportunities could be there's a high school here that's looking for internship opportunities. So those are opportunities to creatively think about that will make doing your work a little easier. And then there's threats, or I like to call them challenges. And those are things that simply exist that might make doing your work a little harder. That could be, for example, uncertainty in the economy, or certainly during COVID, everyone said, well, the economy, the economy, the economy. And that is something you can't control. And it just might make your fundraising a little more challenging, or you have to be a little more creative. So that's the example of a threat or a challenge.
Connie,
Phase, yes, please.
may I ask a quick question? This is Pam Vlogger with
Please,
the Austin Foundation. Great. Well,
please.
thank you so much for doing this training. Loving it so far. Is it safe to say that if your organization or nonprofit is capped in growth, I think that was the first slide that said something about resources. I
Mhm.
forget what the first slide said, but if you have a limitation on resources, and you currently, I see phase 3, phase 4, if where we are now is where we want to be, if we are where we want to be and we have a limitation on resources, meaning we can't grow anymore, does that mean that you do not need a strategic plan?
I wouldn't say so, because a strategic plan isn't necessarily about always doing more. It could be about looking at what you're doing and seeing if there's ways you could do it better. For example, when I suggested that, adding a new evaluation component, for example, to a program would be a way of, or if you haven't evaluated your programs in a while, that would be a way of not necessarily adding more on the plate or growing, but are we sure we're doing the right things?
Okay.
And are we sure we're effective, for example? So your strategic plan might be more about, uh, would be more about looking and examining what you are doing. For example, in the section for your board of directors, if you have, hopefully you have term limits, looking at turnover in your board and assessing what new characteristics do we need on the board? How effective is the board? Does the board need training? Do we need new committees? Not necessarily program growth, but looking at internal growth.
Okay.
Does that make
Excellent.
sense?
Thank you.
Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
100%. Yep.
Oh,
It's
good.
more about effectiveness. Yeah.
It's
Thank you.
effectiveness, yes, and that can be a perfectly fine strategic plan. It's just all about effectiveness. I've done a couple recently with organizations that were maybe, say, 10 years old. And a big component was, we need to evaluate these programs. Yeah, we think they're great. They make sense, they're wonderful, but we need to really seriously evaluate them. And so most of the elements were not about increasing quantity, it was about assessing quality.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, and then phase 5 is you actually start into writing the plan. And there are a few things that you want to think about in terms of how the plan's going to be developed. The first question you're going to have is, how long should this plan be? What makes sense for us? I would suggest no more than 3 years. And depending on your organization, a plan that's, say, 18 months or 2 years might in fact be appropriate, because sometimes a shorter plan is a better option, because you might not want to plan too far into the future if there might be some significant changes or unknowns occurring. such as a significant leadership transition. If you know your executive director is going to retire in a year, you might not want to make up a strategic plan, say more than 2 years, because the new executive director is going to need to shape and influence the new strategic plan going forward. If there's a potential funding change that might alter the organization significantly, let's say a huge portion of your work is being funded by a government program, and there's a question that that government program might go away, you might not want to go make the plan go too far past where you would learn whether the government program was going to continue or not, for example. Or if there's a significant programmatic change, like you're really considering adding in a new component, or if you're considering a merger, you might not want to go too far down the road because you're going to need to significantly adjust things at a certain point, and then all that work on, say, year 3 might be wasted. And as you're thinking about writing the plan, you want to keep everybody involved in this process. There's a real danger in just having a small group develop a strategic plan. I really encourage you to include everyone so everyone has a vested interest in the plan. Then one of the next questions you want to ask yourself are, what are the sections in the plan? So the strategic plan is this big thing, and then you want to start cutting it into bite-sized pieces so you can manage it. So that's really the whole task of strategic planning, to avoid getting overwhelmed. So you think about, what are the different sections of the plan going to be? You're in nonprofits, certainly we have a section about our programs, fundraising, maybe one for marketing, administration, finance. You have some finance concerns. You might have one for human resources if you're a large enough organization. You'll have one for governance, which is the board of directors, your standing committees. And depending on the work of your organization, you might have other ones as well. And feel free to add in whatever else you need to make sure that every aspect of your organization's work is included. So if you have buildings or land, you might have one for facilities. If you're a membership organization, you would have a section on membership, perhaps. If collaborations are a big issue for you, that you want to expand your collaborations, and that's a real push for you, you want a section on that. And then you want to decide, what is your process going to be for building the plan? Are you going to do it in full group meetings? Are you going to do committee meetings for each section? Are you going to use your standing committees? Some organizations like using if they have a full roster of standing committees, they like using, say, the Human Resources Committee develops the strategic plan goals for the Human Resources section. And that can be a very easy way of handling that. Other organizations, I worked with one where they wanted everyone involved in every meeting. And so luckily I think there were only 5 sections of the plan, but we had 5 strategic plan meetings, because basically developing the goals and objectives for each section takes about an hour and a half. It's not a long process, but it's a process. But they wanted everybody involved in everything, and so that's what we did. There was another organization that really wanted to get this done very, very quickly. So I recruited a colleague, and he and I met with them on 2 successive Saturdays, just for about 3 or 4 hour meeting each day, and we did the whole thing. So their strategic plan was done in a week. They were in a hurry, and people were available, and it worked for them. But whatever you decide, it really needs to work for the people, for the staff and the board and the volunteers who are going to be involved. Personally, I like creating a subcommittee for each section, which allows people to choose what area of the plan they'd like to work on based on their interests or their knowledge. And that cuts down the number of meetings that everybody has to go to. And that's usually a very appealing thing for most organizations. And I like doing those meetings on Zoom just because it makes it so easy for everybody to attend. And usually only 1 meeting, or at the most 2, are needed to develop the goals for each section. And then you want to start really digging into how to write the plan. Hugh, the next slide, I think. Thank you. So you want to reflect on the SWOT. As you see this chart, it's a little, if you're graphically oriented, this chart will make sense. If you're not, don't worry about it. But basically what it says is things start on the left with the mission. Then certainly the vision and the values play into that. And then you start looking at the external trends. And so your first step in working on actually writing the goals is to look back at that SWOT analysis, look at the things that you identified that need strengthening, look at the opportunities that are out there that you could capitalize on. And you want to look at your community feedback if you did that and see, for example, what did people say about our programs? What did people say about the board of directors when we asked them? What did they say about what new growth could happen in the future and how that relates to the particular section that you're developing? And so you want to come up with goals that build on your strengths. That's that internal evaluation, that address the weaknesses ideally, that take advantage of the opportunities because that's going to make accomplishing things a little better, and that just take into consideration the threats. The threats don't mean not to do something. Again, they just mean to be aware that something may take longer, there may be more obstacles, it may cost a little more money. So you just want to think about that a little bit carefully. And that's also one of the nice things that strategic planning provides us, is an opportunity to just sit back and reflect and go, well, do we really want to go down that path? It's a chance to think about it and to discuss it in a thoughtful way. You want to keep your plan realistic yet challenging. You don't want to put so much in it that it's going to be impossible to complete or feel overwhelming. It's important to remember we're already doing a lot of work for this nonprofit. So the staff and the board need to have workload considerations. If you're an already busy nonprofit, you don't want 10 goals in each section. You maybe want 4 or 5. You need to keep it realistic in terms of how much. And you want to think outside the box. Strategic planning gives you a nice opportunity to do that. But I like saying think outside the box, but not too far outside the box. In other words, it stimulates visionary and creative thinking, which I think is one of the reasons I love doing it. And it promotes considering new, sometimes revolutionary ideas. But it's really important that this thinking be done within a framework of adhering to the mission and acknowledging what's realistic and doable, given the resources that you have or your ability to garner new resources should you need them. So you want to avoid lofty, broad-reaching goals that are unrealistic and aren't going to be useful. Like, we're going to be the premier healthcare provider in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's not going to help you much. But you also don't want to thwart creative ideas with negativity and the kind of mindset of, well, we tried that before and it didn't work, so it's not going to work now. A program that couldn't be successful a while ago might possibly be successful today if circumstances and resources have changed. So you want to have a certain tolerance for that creative brainstorming part that makes strategic planning interesting. And again, you want to avoid broad, wide-ranging goals like engage new constituencies. That doesn't tell you the what, the who, and by when as you see in the blue boxes over here on the right. Or strengthen and diversify funding. Again, the what, the who, and by and when are missing. How would you know you reached that goal? However, if you said you want to strengthen and diversify funding by increasing fundraising revenues and donors by 20% each year of the plan, that at least gives you a target to shoot for. And when you develop your tactical or implementation plan, which is actually the action steps attached to each goal and objective, you want to consider who's going to be involved in implementing the goals. New committees may need to be formed, staff may grow, board members may come and go. As a result, it's really important that you develop this tactical plan, including specific measurable steps of what needs to be done, when, and who's going to lead it. And that, again, is that far right-hand column in blue. Because without that tactical plan, goals just become wishes or big picture thinking because there's no clear pathway to achieve them. And a successful plan includes accountability, how to manage the obstacles if there are any, and setbacks, which there may be, and where to find additional support. So the action steps need to include the activity, the person group responsible, when's it going to start, when's it due, and is it going to cost money? And if so, could we provide, do you have a cost estimate, which will help you to figure out how much money do we need to raise, or do we already have, or backing up, we already have the money to do this and we can appropriate the funding, or how much more money are we going to need to raise in order to accomplish this plan? And again, that's where it becomes the strategic plan becomes a really nice fundraising tool, because you can show the plan to a funder and say, see, this program we're asking you to fund is included in our plan. And the multidisciplinary team that we put together to develop this plan felt that this program was going to be really important. And so we'd like you to invest with us. That's a real credibility enhancer. And as we're fundraisers, that's what we're always trying to do, is increase our credibility so that a funder is going to want to invest in our organization, because basically that's what donors are doing, is they're investing in our work. And they have the same types of questions that you would have generally if you were considering investing in a for-profit company. How well is this thought out? How do we know if I give you this money, this project's going to work? But having it in the strategic plan is a credibility enhancer for that. And lastly, you want to implement, once you've crafted this plan and pulled it together, you need to implement it so that it doesn't sit in the computer, which is what gives strategic planning a bad name. I've had a lot of pushback over the years from people going, yeah, well, that's a great thing to do, but, well, you have to have the intention to implement it. And I like to say that strategic plans are like plants. If you don't tend them, they're going to fail. And you've put a lot of time and energy and perhaps some cash into developing this plan. You certainly want to get the benefit of using it. So the board, what I suggest, there's two elements. There's responsibilities of the board and the committees, and then there's the responsibilities of staff. And what I recommend that the board do is, and this seems to work really well in organizations that implement this, is designate one or more board members to be responsible for monitoring the plan. On the board side, the tasks that are responsibility of the board. And each standing committee chair becomes responsible for making sure that the standing committee, if they have plan responsibilities, which they most likely will, are implementing their tasks. And make sure that you look at the plan at least quarterly. If you meet every month, obviously you probably don't want to look at the plan every single month. But if you meet, if you meet every other month or quarterly, look at the plan at least that often. And if you have developed a good tactical plan, that's not going to be that difficult. And as board and staff quickly learn that they're going to be held accountable for their tasks, participation and energy is going to increase. And paying attention to the flow of the tactical plan and when items need to be started and finished will keep the jobs achievable and prevent frustration and burnout. So again, we're back to the bite-sized pieces. It's not like, oh my God, there's 7 different things we have to do in the next 3 years. It's like, no, what do you have to do in the next 6 months? Let's just look at that. And when I'm working with an organization doing strategic planning, I'll often make a tactical plan as not only as a Word document that you can read, but I'll also turn it into an Excel spreadsheet. And I would recommend you do that so that you can easily sort it by what group is responsible, what's the start dates, what are the due dates. You can sort it in all different ways, which makes monitoring it a lot easier. And likewise, for the executive director, needs to do the same approach with the staff so that the strategic plan goals that are assigned to staff become part of their work plans for the year. And at staff meetings, the executive director is checking in to say, all right, how are you doing? This thing is due next month. Where are you at on this? And that kind of thing. So that there's a lot of energy around monitoring it and following up. So again, I really recommend you review the plan at least quarterly. Review which items are due to be done. Like, let's say you're meeting in the middle of March. All right, what was due the end of February, let's say. You want to celebrate your accomplishments because that's a big deal. You want to ask for accountability about goals and things that haven't been started or haven't been completed. And extending due dates is always an option. I mean, that's always something you can do in a strategic plan. If someone says, hey, we got really, really busy last month, I haven't even been able to look at this. Okay, give it 2 more months, 3 more months, that's fine. As long as it stays in the plan, eventually it'll get done. So that extending the due dates is an option. You probably don't want to be too lenient with extending the dates too much, but that's certainly a concept. And especially when you're dealing with board and committee members who are volunteers, I think that needs to be respected. The main thing is to keep people engaged, I think, and to have people enjoy working with the plan. It's not so much being this rigid taskmaster of, oh, you're 2 weeks late. It's not about that. It's about we're continuing to work on this and it's a group effort. We're all pushing to this plan down the road. And during that review, you also want to look at what's going to be due in the next couple of months and who's going to be responsible for that. And you want to think about, are there any additional resources, including time, that may be needed to make these next steps a reality? Or are we going to need more funding? Or have we lost funding that was going to be used to make this goal a possibility or achievable? So you want to look if anything has changed around, implementing this next step. So the question could be, is this step still a go? Is it still appropriate? And the executive director would then report to the board on behalf of the staff for the tasks that are assigned to staff. And then lastly, you want to revise and update the plan. When new opportunities arise, as I mentioned earlier, you want to use the plan to help you figure out if we should undertake this venture. Does it further the goals of the plan? And is it consistent with our mission? Again, that oh so important question always to ask. And if it doesn't, you might want to say no, even to a great opportunity. It just, sorry, it doesn't fit in with our work plan. And again, this can be very helpful if you are in a young organization or if you're going through a growth phase and lots of opportunities are coming up and you're not sure about whether to take on something new or not. And the plan needs to be a living document. If situations change and you need to adjust the plan, use a thoughtful, inclusive process to make the changes and document it. So it could be, we have a whole goal here with 8 action steps. For whatever reason, this is not going to be feasible. We're not going to be doing this now. And we voted to remove this goal from the plan. Just document that you've done it so it's clear. And then you can put on the front of the plan was edited by the board on a particular date. You can make changes as long as it's a thoughtful process and not just, oh, forget that, I don't want to do it, and it disappears. So you can certainly make changes when you need to. And it's also helpful to review the status of the plan on an annual basis, perhaps at a board retreat or a staff retreat, to acknowledge, again, the work that's been done. Encourage people to continue and say, oh, this is great. Look at how far we've come and how much we've done on this plan. And consider any of the upcoming tasks, like next year's goals and objectives that may that may need to be adjusted because circumstances may just have changed. Next slide, Hugh. So this slide is just a sample of one kind of planning session. This is a 4-hour one. Again, I would shy away from it just because I think people get tired and it's a big expectation for somebody to give half a day. But if that works for your organization, that's fine. And you can see this is an initial strategic planning session. So it includes clarifying the goals for the session, that review of the mission statement, looking at what difference do we want to make? What is our purpose? What are our values? What's our vision? Where do we want to be going? It has a little bit of that into it. It also includes the external trends, the environmental scan, what's happening in the world, what do we anticipate maybe happening in the next few years? Is something going to impact us significantly that we need to be aware of? Because all of that awareness is helpful to bring into the strategic planning process. And if collaborations are important for your organization, as probably they should be, and probably they are, You want to think about, are there any other organizations out there in the world that we would like to be collaborating with? Are there ways we can share resources, avoid duplication of services, things of that nature? You want to ask those questions. And then in the afternoon, there's looking at that internal analysis, the SWOT. Where are we vulnerable? Where are we strong? Clarifying some broad brush organizational initiatives and priorities based on that SWOT analysis, and also the environmental scan if you did it, and then the next steps. So you can see how this 4-hour session would serve to sort of jumpstart the whole strategic planning process. And this is just one way to go about it. And again, I would encourage you to develop an approach that's going to work comfortably for your organization. Because we need to keep people engaged. I keep coming back to this, I know, but you need to keep people engaged and inspired and excited about doing this work. Next slide. So these are, again, just a recap of questions to ask. Ask yourselves as you're contemplating it, maybe talking about it at a board meeting. Why do we need to plan? Is there a particular thing that's pushing us that we need to do that means we need to plan? What are the motivations? How long is it going to take in terms of time? Is it going to cost money? Are we willing to spend money? Who could we gather together to help us with this? Do we want to hire a consultant? What would the value be? What would we ask that person to do? How much are we willing to spend? If we want to do that and we don't have the money, where could we get the money? There are foundations such as the Community Foundation that make grants to nonprofits to enable them for capacity building projects, and strategic planning is certainly a capacity building project. And then this question I love: how will we communicate the final plan to the public? Some organizations choose to make a big deal about rolling out their strategic plan. And I think it's a great way, if this is appropriate for you, to do that, to show your key donors, your supporters, your constituents that we've done this planning process. Here's where we're headed in the next few years. It's a great fundraising opportunity where you're not asking for money, where you're simply saying, hey, look at this great plan. This is what we're thinking of doing, and this is our focus for the next few years. And even if you're an organization such as Pam was mentioning, where you're not looking to grow your organization, you're still looking maybe to improve its quality or its effectiveness, you can communicate that. So it doesn't have to be, oh, where something's new and shiny. It can be something's going to be more solid and better as a result of this plan. So you can think about doing a little reception at the end of the day, an hour and a half, rolling out the plan. It doesn't have to be a deadly experience. Just a quick rollout of the plan. This is what we're doing. This is what we're going to need. Here's where we're headed and where we hope to be by the time we're done with the plan. And again, that last question is, can we really commit the time and the funds? Is this a good time for us to do this? Or when would be a good time? If you have a certain period during the year, and many nonprofits do, when it's like really, really busy, like let's say you're an environmental organization and you run summer camps for kids, you probably don't want to be doing strategic planning in the summer because you're really spread thin and doing a million other things. So you want to think about that in terms of what makes sense for us. And Donna's commenting, saying she loves this as a way to engage board and volunteers. And absolutely, I think strategic planning is one of the best ways, because it has so many different components. You can have someone in a focus group, you can interview them, you can invite them to a meeting. There's so many different ways to get people engaged in what you do. And you get a great plan at the end of the day too. So it's sort of like a win-win. So that's the end of the PowerPoint. So if you could take the power, that's cool. And any questions anybody has, or comments or observations? I'm sure some of you have been through strategic planning, so you've got some observations yourselves. Anybody have a comment? Or
I just have a quick question. Did
Yeah.
you, and I may have missed it, but are you able to give us those slides, or just even the agenda,
Yes.
just examples?
Yes, Hugh will send the PowerPoint they'll send the PowerPoint to you probably this afternoon or tomorrow.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
great. And
yeah.
are you yourself available to ask questions, follow up later or no?
Sure, of
Okay,
course. Yeah, and I think my contact info is on the front of the PowerPoint.
You know
okay.
what, Connie, could you just type your email into the chat?
Sure. I think I can handle this. Let's see.
And also, the presentation is also available just in case you want to get to it immediately. It is on our website right now. You can just go to Chester County Community Foundation. It's under when you're clicking on different headings. It's on Get on Board. You'll find it, and then click on that, and then you'll get to workshops and roundtables, and the presentation is there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mhm. Any other questions or
Oh.
comments? Yeah.
Chris, yes, the recording. I don't think we send the recording out on email, but it is available on the website, and then you can click on that and get the recording.
Great. Any other comments or observations? Is anybody raring to go out and start doing strategic planning now?
Yes.
Yay. Yes. Excellent. I love it. All right. Well, I think if there's no other comments, we're a few minutes early, but that's never a bad thing. And so appreciate you all coming and being interested in strategic planning.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Yeah.